Encourage asking questions and discussion. Feel free to put your hand up using the Zoom function icon. Actually, there's a chat that you can use, so put your questions in there. And if I don't see them, Cheryl will let me know that they're there, um, and will bring them to my attention. This is a safe learning space. So you'll note during the adoption of this training that the good access and inclusion in the delivery of this training. So we adopt closed captions at the base of the screen. You can turn those off if you would prefer in your own view. Closed captions can benefit viewers who may be deaf or hard of hearing, as well as viewers who may have a learning disability, an attention deficit, or autism. The other good access and inclusion practice is I describe the images on the screen during this training that benefits people who are blind, have low vision, use assistive technology, live in low bandwidth areas, or want more context. Without descriptions, your viewers won't know what your images contain or why they are important. I'm delivering 3 modules of training as part of the Disability Action and Inclusion Plan webinar series with the Canberra Business Chamber. Today we are commencing with the first module. It is an introduction to access and inclusion, and I am aware that there are a number of NDIS registered providers on board, so you may already have an existing base of knowledge, but then other members may just be at the beginning. So you're not expected to know everything. I'm here to deliver training, but also I and we can learn from each other. I'm not assuming that you don't have a level of knowledge, so let's just learn from each other. Getaboutable knows how to assist businesses to deliver accessible and inclusive offerings, and this introductory training module, together with the remaining modules in this training package, will build on your learning to equip you to build your capacity to be more accessible and inclusive in your practice. We organise the Accessible and Inclusive Tourism annual event that provides all tourism stakeholders, businesses, tour operators, policymakers, destination management organisations with an opportunity to learn how to cater to the valuable, accessible and inclusive market, to promote sustainable growth and connect with each other to create momentum and contribute to the upgrowth of the sector. On this slide, one of our sponsors at the last Accessible Tourism Conference on the Gold Coast last year, iFly Indoor Skydiving, that includes accessible skydiving, offered flight vouchers. In this slide, you can see a series of pictures of Dr. Yasmin Gray, the founder and director of Getaboutable, who has a disability and mobilises in a motorised chair, enjoying her iFly experience. Often people think accessible tourism is limited opportunities for people with disabilities, but you can see in this example that there are no bounds really to the accessible options available. It is the way you think through what to see, what the possibilities and adaptations can be. I appreciate that you may not be from a visitor economy business, but lifting this lens of limitation is applicable to all businesses. Does anybody have any questions or comments at this stage? Okay, we'll move on then. So in Australia, more than 1 in 6 Australians have a disability. That's 4.4 million people. What does everyone think about that? Is that a surprise? Maybe it's what people expect. What comes to mind when you think of the word disability? There's no wrong answers here. So if anybody wants to share, even if you've got extensive knowledge in the disability sector, it would be welcome to other people that may not. But please put any responses that you have in the chat in the QA section down the bottom of the screen. So we've got a comment there that I can see from Melinda. Thanks, Melinda. Hi, are those numbers based on self-reported disability or another data source? No, they're ABS data. So I can put that as the answer, just so that we've got that as a chat as well. Thanks very much, Melinda. So what comes to mind when you think of the word disability? Does anybody have any thoughts about that? Okay, well, here we go, it's got something there. Barrier to inclusion. Absolutely, Zalantana, sorry, apologise for my pronunciation. Yes, there are barriers to inclusion that people with disability experience. You're absolutely right. And we're going to talk a bit more about that. Thank you for accommodating my lack of pronunciation. And Melinda, disability now means so many things, not just wheelchairs and ramps. You're absolutely right there, Melinda. And in fact, it's 8% of the disability community who mobilises in a wheelchair and 90% of people with a disability that are hidden. So thanks for sharing that. Has anybody else got any thoughts? Often when the community is asked this question, the answer is frequently someone in a wheelchair. As you were saying there before, Melinda, that's often what comes as top of mind, or someone with a guide dog. These images pop up because they are easily visible and often what's portrayed in the media. But disability is very diverse and doesn't fit into contained boxes. There is overlap in the categories of disability, which I will outline today. Often people have multiple disabilities as well. So just going through some of these categories, thinking, as I said, that they're not necessarily just all uniform, but it's just a way to convey some of that diversity of disability. So firstly, physical disability. Some of the examples of physical disability can be multiple sclerosis, muscular dystrophy, chronic arthritis, cerebral palsy, chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, spina bifida, loss of limbs, and spinal cord injury. And in terms of physical disability as a symbol, often it is indicated by the international symbol, which is widely used. The one on the top of the screen on the right-hand side, it's the international symbol, which is widely used for disability access wherever that's available. Another category of disability is blindness and vision impairment. Vision impairment can range from blindness or very low vision to an inability to see particular colours. There are many variations of symbols for vision impairment. This one on the top left-hand side represents partial sight. Another category of disability is deafness and hearing impairment. So hard of hearing refers to people with hearing loss, ranging from mild to severe. People who are hard of hearing usually communicate through spoken language and can benefit from hearing aids, cochlear implants, and other assistive devices, as well as captioning. Deaf people mostly have profound hearing loss, which implies very little or no hearing. They often use sign language for communication, represented by this international symbol for access for hearing loss that is on the top in the middle. That often communicates then to the hearing loss community that there are devices or services available for deaf or hearing impaired. Another category of disability is cognitive disability. So, for example, intellectual disability, autism spectrum disorders, severe persistent mental illness, brain injury and stroke, and Alzheimer's disease and other dementias. For this, there are many symbols. This one is on the left-hand side down the bottom, of a head with a cog in the middle where the brain would be. Another category of disability, psychosocial disability, for example, schizophrenia and schizoaffective disorder, anxiety disorders, obsessive compulsive disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, agoraphobia and social phobia, and mood disorders such as depression and bipolar, for which there are many symbols. This one in the middle down the bottom is of a head with a few puzzles and one coming away from the rest of the group. Another final category is neurological disability. For example, cerebral palsy, dementia, epilepsy, motor neurone disease, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's disease, and spinal conditions. Intellectual disability, for example, Fragile X syndrome, Down syndrome, developmental delay, Prader-Willi syndrome, for which there are many symbols, and this one is of a head with an image of a brain therein. Does anybody have any comments or thoughts about the diversity of disability that I'm just outlining here? And it's just a representation. It's not absolutely inclusive of all possible disabilities. No? Okay. So as we have learnt in the previous exercise, front of mind thoughts, and we were saying that before in the comments, that it's not just about wheelchairs and ramps and that physical uh, visible notice of disability. What happens is that, it often involves invisible disabilities. In reality, 90% of the 4.4 million people with disability in Australia are living with an invisible disabilities. Not all disabilities are visible. Some are not immediately obvious, such as developmental autism, intellectual disability, Fragile X, energy medical Crohn's syndrome, lupus, mental health, anxiety, depression, personality disorder, neurological conditions, dementia, Tourette syndrome, epilepsy. They could be physical, like arthritis, vision or hearing loss, or trauma-related, like post-traumatic stress disorder and acquired brain injury. So as I was saying before, in response to Melinda's comment, it is only 8% of the disability community that mobilise in a wheelchair, and 40 to 50% of people are neurodivergent. Does anybody have any comments or thoughts on that? Okay. So universal design, I'm not sure if this is a new concept or a known concept for people that are online today. I'm just really going to outline briefly, this is an introduction. If you'd really like to learn more about universal design, which I encourage you to do, the Centre for Universal Design, the reference at the bottom of this slide, is a good source. So universal design is the design and composition of an environment so that it can be accessed, understood, and used to the greatest extent possible by all people, regardless of their age, size, ability, or disability. If an environment is accessible, usable, convenient, and a pleasure to use, everyone benefits. By considering the diverse needs and abilities of all throughout the design process, universal design creates products, services, and environments that meet people's needs. Simply put, universal design is good design. By designing for diversity, products, environments, communications, facilities, and services can be created that are more functional and more user-friendly for the widest range of people and situations, without special or separate design and at little or no extra cost. It is not a one-size-fits-all attitude, but a creative design approach. The purpose of the principles is to guide the design of the environments, products, and communications. So I'll just go through each of the 7 principles just to provide some detail on what they involve. So the first one, equitable use. So the design is useful and marketable to people with diverse abilities. The second principle, flexible in use. The design accommodates a wide range of individual preferences and abilities. The third principle, simple and intuitive to use. Use of the design is easy to understand, regardless of the user's experience, knowledge, language skills, or current concentration. The fourth principle, perceptible information. The design communicates necessary information, effective to the user, regardless of ambient conditions or the user's sensory abilities. The fifth principle, tolerance for error. The design minimises hazards and the adverse consequences of accidental or unintended actions. The sixth principle, low physical effort. The design minimises hazards and the adverse consequences of accidental or unintended actions. And the seventh and final principle, size and space for approach and use. Appropriate size and space is provided for approach, reach, manipulation, and use regardless of the user's body size, posture, or mobility. Getaboutable would encourage businesses to include people with diverse capabilities and limitations in product and service design and user research. Does anybody have any questions or comments around this? Is this a concept that you're adopting already, or is it new and you'd like to learn a bit more about this? Okay, so just a little bit about what we do at Getaboutable. So we at Getaboutable offer you more than a traditional consulting service. We are committed to instilling confidence in our clients to take that crucial first step towards your accessibility and inclusion goals. What truly sets us apart is that we are one of the fewer agencies that approach consulting from the perspective of the full range of disabilities, including neurodiversity and hidden disabilities, as well as vision, hearing, and mobility assistance needs. So each member of team either has a disability or they have a loved one who does. So I have 2 siblings who have a disability. I don't have a disability myself, and my son is neurodiverse. We provide personalised support that focuses on delivering tangible outcomes for our clients, assisting businesses and organisations turn good intentions to concrete actions. And we do that with a range of organisations, operators, so whether that's in tourism or events or community organisations or commercial businesses, destinations and governments and organisations. So, the most significant barrier for people with disability to participate fully in the community is the attitude and behaviour of the community towards people with disability. This cartoon depicts a man in a power wheelchair sitting next to a woman wearing dark glasses and holding a dog lead. They both look quizzically at a non disabled man who is facing them as he says, "We've removed the barriers for you, but you're still tragic victims." Behind him are 2 barriers which have been broken down. One reads attitudinal barriers and the other reads physical barriers. David Lupin, the cartoonist from Crippen Cartoons, based in the UK, is a white male wheelchair user who is conscious of the need to represent people with disabilities in all their diversity in his cartoons. His cartoons appear across the world, being used by disability groups and organisations. What's your impression of this cartoon and its messaging? Do you want to let me know your thoughts in the Q&A section? Great. So Zalantana, and apologies continued about my pronunciation, you do have participants who experience this exact thing. Yes, it's sadly common. So obviously you're working in the NDIS space as a registered provider. That's not good to hear. Melinda, this describes the lingering patronising approach to people living with disability, things done to rather than with. Absolutely. It's very objectifying rather than seeing the common humanity that people with disability share with the rest of the community. And Zalantana, they're not provided with the support to access place of employment. Yeah, and we want to drive some change in that, don't we, collectively? And, you know, I applaud the Canberra Business Chamber for this initiative and others that seek to improve opportunities for people with disability to engage in an employment pathway that results in an ongoing permanent job and get the support required to have that equity of participation. But, you know, stakeholders like yourselves and ourselves and the Canberra Business Chamber can ensure that we improve better outcomes in that area. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts there. So here is a comment from a person with disability who was part of, there was a national survey undertaken in 2021 by the Centre of Research Excellence in Disability and Health. The national survey was called Attitudes Matter, Findings from a National Survey of Community Attitudes Towards People with Disability in Australia. This comment is a quote from a person with disability. We're portrayed as victims or charity cases, or we're portrayed as heroes or inspirational. And those two extremes really reinforce the current negative and limiting attitudes towards people with disabilities. What does everybody think of that comment from that person with disability? Can you relate to that either in your current work that you're doing, or even if you haven't been exposed to people with disability, is that something that you can relate to or have heard about? Thanks, Melinda. So Melinda says it's very relatable. I find, though, for people with psychosocial disability, there is also a common response of fear and avoidance to that ongoing stigma. Absolutely. I think often, and that's why sessions like today, particularly for people who haven't been exposed to people with disability, you know, at Get Aboutable, we think it's important that people get an opportunity to build their awareness and understanding wherever they're at. So, but we often feel a palpable fear of people with disability when we're speaking to people who haven't been exposed to people with disability. And we want to break that down. So in your experience, Melinda, it sounds like particularly for people with psychosocial disability, you've experienced that you've witnessed that they experience that fear and avoidance, ongoing stigma. Yes, there's a lot of stereotypes, particularly about people with psychosocial disability, correct. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else want to make any comments there?
Francis, it's Cheryl. I can't type anything in. But what I would say is, and I don't have a disability, but I think people just want to live an ordinary, normal life like we all do. And
Absolutely,
it's a
Cheryl.
shame. Yeah.
I totally agree. And you know, a little bit of background about me. I have come to Canberra in November last year and joined Get Aboutable. But prior to that, I was involved 10 years in the NDIS, working for a NDIS partner in the community in Victoria. And so I have a real belief in the scheme. So I thank you, the providers that are on on the line. The scheme wouldn't be able to be delivered without you. And that real mantra of the scheme, to be able to have the opportunity to live an ordinary life, is so important for people with disability. I think that when I first joined that scheme, I realised in my privilege how little of the ordinary that people with disabilities can access in their daily lives. So my awareness shot through the roof, and I'm endeavour to make that mindfulness as I go forward to work with yourselves and others to improve that accessibility of all aspects of daily life. Thanks for sharing, everybody. I'm going to hand it over to Stella Young. I'm going to share the sound so that you'll be able to hear this. For people who don't know Stella, Stella was an Australian journalist, a comedian, and a disability rights activist. Stella died in December 2014. Stella delivered this TED Talk in April 2014.
I grew up in a very small country town in Victoria. I had a very normal, low-key kind of upbringing. I went to school, I hung out with my friends, I fought with my younger sisters. It was all very normal. And when I was 15, a member of my local community approached my parents and wanted to nominate me for a Community Achievement Award. And my parents said, that's really nice, but there's kind of one glaring problem with that. She hasn't actually achieved anything. Yeah, and they were right. I went to school, I got good marks, I had a very low-key after-school job in my mum's hairdressing salon, and I spent a lot of time watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Dawson's Creek. Yeah, I know, what a contradiction. But they were right. I wasn't doing anything that was out of the ordinary at all. I wasn't doing anything that could be considered an achievement if you took disability out of the equation. Years later, I was on my second teaching round in a Melbourne high school, and I was about 20 minutes into a Year 11 legal studies class when this boy put up his hand and said, "Hey, miss, when are you going to start doing your speech?" And I said, "What speech?" I'd been talking to them about defamation law for a good 20 minutes. And he said, like your motivational speaking. When people in wheelchairs come to school, they usually say, like, inspirational stuff. Yeah. It's usually in the big hall. And that's when it dawned on me. This kid had only ever experienced disabled people as objects of inspiration. We are not, to this kid, and it's not his fault. I mean, that's true for many of us. For lots of us, disabled people are not our teachers or our doctors or our manicurists. We're not real people. We are there to inspire. And in fact, I'm sitting on this stage looking like I do in this wheelchair, and you are probably kind of expecting me to inspire you, right? Yeah. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid I'm going to disappoint you dramatically. I'm not here to inspire you. I'm here to tell you that we have been lied to about disability. Yeah, we've been sold the lie that disability is a bad thing. Capital B, capital T. It's a bad thing. And to live with disability makes you exceptional. It's not a bad thing. And it doesn't make you exceptional. And in the past few years, we've been able to propagate this lie even further via social media. You may have seen images like this one. The only disability in life is a bad attitude. Or this one. Your excuse is invalid, indeed. Or this one. Before you quit, try. Yeah. These are just a couple of examples, but there are a lot of these images out there. You might have seen the one, the little girl with no hands, drawing a picture with a pencil held in her mouth. You might have seen a child running on carbon fibre prosthetic legs. And these images, there are lots of them out there. They are what we call inspiration porn. And I use the term porn deliberately because they objectify one group of people for the benefit of another group of people. So in this case, we're objectifying disabled people for the benefit of non-disabled people. The purpose of these images is to inspire you, to motivate you, so that we can look at them and think, well, however bad my life is, it could be worse. I could be that person. But what if you are that person? I've lost count of the number of times that I've been approached by strangers wanting to tell me that they think I'm brave or inspirational. And this was long before my work had any kind of public profile. They were just kind of congratulating me for managing to get up in the morning and remember my own name. And it is objectifying. These images objectify disabled people for the benefit of non-disabled people. They are there so that you can look at them and think that things aren't so bad for you, to put your worries into perspective. And life as a disabled person is actually somewhat difficult. We do overcome some things. But the things that we're overcoming are not the things that you think they are. They are not things to do with our bodies. I use the term disabled people quite deliberately because I subscribe to what's called the social model of disability, which tells us that we are more disabled by our bodies, the society that we live in rather, than by our bodies and our diagnoses. So I've lived in this body a long time. I'm quite fond of it. It does the things that I need it to do, and I've learnt to use it to the best of its capacity, just as you have. And that's the thing about those kids in those pictures as well. They're not doing anything out of the ordinary. They are just using their bodies to the best of their capacity. So is it really fair to objectify them in the way that we do, to share those images? People, when they say, you're an inspiration, they mean it as a compliment. They mean it as a compliment. And I know why it happens. It's because of the lie. It's because we've been sold this lie that disability makes you exceptional. And it honestly doesn't. And I know what you're thinking. I'm up here bagging out inspiration. You're thinking, geez, Stella, aren't you inspired sometimes by some things? And the thing is, I am. I learn from other disabled people all the time. I'm learning not that I am luckier than them, though. I am learning that it's a genius idea to use a pair of barbecue tongs to pick up things that you drop. I'm learning that nifty trick where you can charge your mobile phone battery from your chair battery. Genius. We are learning from each other strength and endurance, not against our bodies and our diagnoses, but against a world that exceptionalises and objectifies us. I really think that this lie that we've been sold about disability is the greatest injustice. It makes life hard for us. And that quote, "the only disability in life is a bad attitude," the reason that that's bullshit is because it's just not true. Because of the social model of disability, no amount of smiling at a flight of stairs has ever made it turn into a rap. Never. Smiling at a television screen isn't going to make closed captions appear for people who are deaf. No amount of standing in the middle of a bookshop and radiating a positive attitude is going to turn all those books into Braille. It's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. I really want to live in a world where disability is not the exception but the norm. I want to live in a world where a 15-year-old girl sitting in her bedroom watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer isn't referred to as achieving anything because she's doing it sitting down. I want to live in a world where we don't have such low expectations of disabled people that we are congratulated for getting out of bed and remembering our own names in the morning. I want to live in a world where we value genuine achievement for disabled people. And I want to live in a world where a kid in year 11 in a Melbourne high school is not one bit surprised that his new teacher is a wheelchair user. Disability doesn't make you exceptional, but questioning what you think you know about it does. Thank you.
Does anybody have any comments or thoughts, if they're comfortable to share that through the Q&A section about what Stella had to say? Yeah, totally agree, Zelantana. Brilliant. She's so funny and on the point. Absolutely. I've actually got a little Stella Young image on my desktop, keeping it real. That's Stella, and that's what I hold myself accountable to. Any other thoughts? Oops, sorry, gone to the wrong slide. Okay, there's lots to process there. I'll leave you with that. So essentially, behaviour. The behaviour of people. Oh, we've got another comment there. Just capture that. Melinda. Thank you, Melinda. Such a great speaker. She touched on the notion of people doing totally the wrong thing, but with good intentions. Interested in how we hang on to those good intentions while correcting or changing their attitudes and behaviour. I think in my experience, Melinda, and maybe in yours, I'm not sure, given it sounds like you work directly with people with disability, really my experience is that people with disability are very generous. It's the way that people do express those thoughts, and sometimes it is out of ignorance, but it is fueled by good intentions. And it can be a bit of a critical moment how we address that. So for me as an ally, not someone with a disability, if I hear that, we don't want to go in and have the red cape flapping and try to save people with disability and take away their agency to act themselves. But I see it as my responsibility to affect community attitudes and behaviour. So, I will make a comment because for me, silence is acceptance. And those people maybe just haven't had an opportunity to be exposed to a person with disability, and maybe they just don't understand. So it's an education opportunity. But I also know that you don't, through lots of years of trial and error, that you don't necessarily get change if you try to educate in a way that is defensive and aggressive. So it's really comes to the interaction with an understanding. So I'd really encourage, even in your business operations, this is an area that you need to consider. So if you are engaging people with a disability for employment, for instance, and they do deliver operations in a public environment, invariably the attitude and the behaviour of the community towards people with disability is going to be on display. And how are you going to act? How are you going to step up and address that? So it's something to think through. So in relation to this survey that we were speaking about before, the National Survey of Community Attitudes towards People with Disability in Australia, they always also looked at behaviour. So here's some statistics that came out of that study. 78% of people in the community agreed that people are unsure how to act towards people with disability. 63% agreed that people tend to become impatient with people with disability. 61% agreed that people often make fun of people with disability. 42% agreed that people ignore people with disability. And 41% agreed that people with disability are treated as if they have no feelings. What do you think about these findings? Have you seen any of the evidence of that in your workplaces, or even if you haven't been exposed to people with disability in your workplace, have you witnessed it in the community, in the public environment? So we've got a comment here. Thank you, Zolantana. It can be challenging for people who have never had a lived experience, absolutely engaging with people with disability to understand how to interact with them. There is a lack of general education around acceptance and inclusion for people with disability. I totally agree. And it's only going to get better if we make a contribution to improving that. And I'm sure you probably do in your work. So thank you for your contributions. Does anybody have any comments or thoughts around that? So we have another from a person with disability directly from this Matter national survey of community attitudes towards people with disability in relation to behaviour. I've had instances where if people find out that I'm disabled, halfway through speaking to them, they're like, okay, so yeah, don't worry about it. It's okay. You don't have to do anything like that. You don't have to do what I'm asking you to do. They let you off the hook way too easily, or they don't quite know what to do with themselves. So they try and back away. They don't mean offence. They just mean, I don't know how to handle this situation. So I'm going to try and not offend you by just walking away and not worrying about it. So, it can be a response, as you were saying, Zolantana, that they don't know how to respond. But also, we need an opportunity to educate and build comfortability around interaction and building that point of connection. People with disabilities are fellow community members and we're all human. Has anybody got any thoughts on this quote from a person with disability? Okay. All right. So what does access and inclusion mean to you? Has anybody got any thoughts they would like to share on how they define access and inclusion? An example of each of those, if you're comfortable to share in the chat function. Okay. We've got someone who's responded. So thanks, Sultana. People being able to perform their roles successfully with minimal assistance from others. That includes both access and inclusion. Thank you, Zolantana, for sharing that perspective. And we also have another comment, Melinda. Genuine, not tokenistic inclusion. Yes, totally agree, Melinda. Not insertion as a afterthought, but meaningfully from the very beginning. You are welcome, like everyone here today. Thank you very much for your contributions. So accessibility generally refers to the physical venue, setting and infrastructure of your business, such as ramps, accessible bathrooms, hearing loops or quiet rooms. But accessibility can also be improved through temporary changes like moving furniture in a business for people with vision or mobility difficulties. Being inclusive is having a respectful and welcoming attitude towards people with disability who plan to or do attend your business as a potential or actual patron or employees, and a willingness to consider ways they can be included even if your business isn't fully accessible. And at Get Aboutable, we really encourage not using that term, fully accessible. It's highly unlikely, given the length and breadth of disability diversity, that you're going to be fully accessibility needs because they are so diverse. Accessibility isn't just ensuring people can physically access your business, it means your services and facilities, including information, are accessible. People with disabilities need information that enables them to pre-plan participation in a business. Businesses need to make the accessibility features of their business clearly available to enable people with disability to make informed choices, to confidently participate in business based on whether it is going to meet their accessibility needs. Having this information easily available will lead to people with disability being more likely to use the business. Although accessible and inclusive are not interchangeable, they are very closely related concepts. The more accessible your business is, the wider the range of people who can be meaningfully included and fully participate. No matter how accessible business it is, if it doesn't feel inclusive and welcoming, that may be a barrier to access, particularly for people who have hidden disabilities such as mental health conditions. So on this slide is an image of a guide dog under the seat of their handler at an eatery. So what is an inclusive and accessible business? Being an inclusive and accessible business simply means ensuring your goods and services are accessible to all people regardless of their physical limitations, disabilities or age. An inclusive and accessible business enables people with disability to access your goods and services independently without obstacles or difficulties. The diversity of customers of all abilities are welcome and treated with equity, respect and dignity, and they experience of being connected to the community and feel they belong. Accessible and inclusive improvements don't need to be expensive. In this picture, we can see a person with disability who mobilises in a motorised chair, approaching the service desk, attended by a customer service staff member. So good access benefits everyone when thinking about accessibility. Everyone benefits when access is better, including other attendees, older people, people making deliveries, people with heavy baggage, families with young children, those with prams, and those who find themselves with injuries where access normally would not be an issue. Our population is ageing, and as we age, our capacities change. More and more of us will benefit from good access to the business we want to use. By 2066, it is projected there will be just over 4.5 million people aged 65 to 74. People aged 75 to 84 will account for 1/3, that's 34% of 3.5 million of the older population. And that's statistics from this last year from the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare Older Australians demographic profile. It is important for businesses to be aware of the low literacy rate by both their customers and employees and deliver information that is designed to meet their needs. Provide information in a range of formats, for example, orally by staff, in person or over the phone, including in the case of people who are deaf or have a hearing impairment, through the use of the telephone typewriter National Relay Service. The National Relay Service is a phone service for people who are deaf, have a hearing impairment, or a complex communication need. The NRS Relay Officer provides a link for the parties to the call and relays exactly what is said or typed. The NRS Relay Officer is present for the duration of the call to ensure smooth communication between the parties, but does not change or interfere with what the parties say. Other formats include in hard copy written material, including a large 18 size font print option, or electronic formats, including by email, via websites and online chat services, such as audio recording. Does anybody have any comments or questions? So good access is also good for business. We've learnt in the previous slides about the projected growth in the ageing population and the proportion of Australians that have a disability. Both are opportunities to businesses to grow their customer base and employees through the accessible business market. In Australia, research shows that in 2021, people with disability and the elderly hold over $40 billion annually of disposable income. But these target markets are largely untapped because traditional design of products and services excludes people with disability and the elderly. But hiring employees that reflect your consumer base can improve products and customer service experience. In fact, inclusive workplaces are 5 times more likely to have excellent customer service. There is a clear opportunity for employers to support their consumer base through improved customer service. People with disability are loyal customers. If they have had an accessible and inclusive experience at a business, they will spread the word within the disability community, and people with disability will use the business with confidence because people with disabilities have used that business and know that it was accessible and inclusive and good for them. So it will be good for them too. Universally, accessible and inclusive business environments benefit from a 20% increase in turnover inclusive environments. Research from Deloitte Access Economics has estimated that for every $1 invested into accessible environments, $13 was generated in return revenue. The Job Access in March 2023, the paper entitled "The Compelling Case for Disability Employment Australia" busted the myth that the cost to employ people with disability is high, outlining the cost to accommodate employees with a disability is no more than to support those without disability. And these adjustments are usually cost effective. One study has estimated a $40 saving for every $1 invested in workplace adjustments. People with disabilities, their carers, families, and friends, that's 1 in 3 Australians, represent a substantial opportunity to business. As previously outlined, it is not just about people in wheelchairs. Accessible and inclusive business, apart from creating that fantastic visitor welcome, which is key, is also a business improvement tool. If you think about the things that a business wants to achieve, increasing your customer base, this helps you achieve that. If you've got a firm business base of customers who are repeating, recommending, being brand advocates and coming along, then you need to grow with them and age with them. And their needs and requirements will change because so many older people will not see themselves or label themselves as being disabled. They will see themselves as having dodgy knees and hips, and their hearing or eyesight isn't so good. But they need exactly the same solutions in terms of larger print and perhaps serving at a table rather than getting up with their arthritic hip to go and collect the food and bring it back. I would encourage businesses not to make assumptions about the financial resources of people with disabilities. Whether they can afford budget or the high end, the market is out there. Besides the financial and even greater social benefits, improved accessibility inclusive can give your business a competitive edge in the marketplace. Does anybody have any questions there? Or comments? So one of the examples that I wanted to talk to you about was around the accessible and inclusive retail businesses. As an example, and this is some sharing from people with disability about what's important to them in relation to, as an example of retail businesses. So, and this is relatable across multiple businesses, not just the retail sector, but I've just pulled this out as an example. And although it may be an area that is not related directly to yourselves, there are those areas that are transferable. And this sharing comes from the Australian Network on Disability Design for Dignity and Retail Guidelines. So you might like to have a look at that resource as a sharing. So that good customer experience is really important to people with disability, and being treated fairly is also really important. Need to think about the whole experience that a person has. So coming to the store or your business premises, there needs to be an accessible pathway for that to happen. So whether that's from accessible parking through to transport options, it's really important. So Melinda, you've written as a comment, you're interested to know, do these criteria differ from the priorities of people without disability in the retail environment? Well, I think that's a really good point. I think good customer experience and being treated fairly would be something that was universal. I think being able to get access to the store or the premises absolutely would be shared, but I think that there may be further barriers that people with disability, particularly if they have a physical disability, but universally as well, if we're thinking about people who might have sensory issues, they would like to know some information about whether there are sensory triggers within that environment that may trigger their not having a very positive experience. So that journey to the store can be very unique towards people with disability because that impacts their preparation and their opportunity to desensitize potentially in the preparation and the lead up to those potential triggers. And the same in relation to inside the store, the layout of that. For some people with disability, if they know that information, they can see already that essentially it may not be able to meet their needs, so they won't come. So it is important for businesses to be very clear about what provisions you do have and what that layout looks like so that people can make those informed choices. In relation to checkout, essentially those payment options need to be available that can accommodate multiple devices. So even the attendant that's photographed in this image, you can see that that is a transferable unit to be able to move rather than having to come physically to the customer service person. The person's bringing the unit, the ATM unit to the customer. It's also important that there is raised numbers on those units so that people with vision impairment or blind are able to independently undertake that transaction. There is a lot of abuse of people with disability to exploit them financially, and there's many cases that go towards the Australian Human Rights Commission around that matter. In relation to customers on the telephone, we've talked a bit before about being able to have that opportunity to have that positive experience, but it's not, that can be relatable to people without disability. You're absolutely correct, Melinda, but I think also, as we've talked about before, if you have the opportunity to be able to speak through the TTY line because you are deaf, then if you wouldn't be able to do that on the telephone otherwise if the TTY was not available. And in relation to purchasing online, having that opportunity is universally beneficial, but for some people, it would be the only way that they could purchase if there is online availability rather than coming into the store. Did anybody have any other thoughts that they wanted to share around that area as an example? No? Okay. One area I wanted to share before we wrap up for today is that if you're not aware, in the ACT, there will be a disability inclusion bill that will be passed by the ACT government. It's likely to be passed in August, is the advice we have from the Office for Disability at this stage. This bill will make having a disability action and inclusion bill mandatory. So just to talk about what a disability action and inclusion plan is, just to build your awareness if you're not aware of them. A disability action and inclusion plan provides you with a strategic blueprint for making your business, group or organisation more inclusive of people with disability and addressing current barriers that reduce or prevent their equal access and participation as visitors, customers, clients and staff members. It is intended to be a living document that helps you and your team to keep action on inclusion front of mind and sustain momentum and measure progress. It should be consulted and reviewed regularly and updated just like other active organisational planning tools. It does help you to share your vision and your commitment and your progress with staff and customers and key stakeholders to engage their support and keep them informed. It will also strengthen grant funding and awards applications that focus on accessibility and inclusion. Get About doesn't expect businesses to drop everything and just focus on access and inclusion. Of course, you're seeking to run a business. A disability action and inclusion plan can help you articulate what it is that you're seeking to address, determine what those barriers are, and nominate a range of actions that may take 3 to 5 years even. But you've got that plan, you make that available to the public can see your commitment, and you can work towards achieving those goals and sharing with the disability community and the public how that you are progressing on those goals. So the Disability Action Inclusion Plan translates your commitment to inclusivity into a set of objectives and actions with timelines and notes on who is responsible for each aspect of implementation aimed at achieving those desired outcomes. Disability action inclusion plans also provide a framework for the provision of reasonable adjustments and responding to the diverse needs of people with disability, assisting organisations to meet their obligations under the Disability Discrimination Act 1992. Plans can be registered with the Australian Human Rights Commission under the Disability Discrimination Act 1992. DAIPs are also known as different things: disability action plans, accessibility action plans, disability inclusion action plans. Get Aboutable Consultancy can work with you to develop a disability action and inclusion plan that gives you a roadmap specifically tailored to your business for navigating the first steps of this journey and embedding consideration of accessibility and inclusion into your ongoing business planning. The Disability Inclusion Bill, as I said, is likely to pass. So it would be good to think about getting on top of that and getting prepared. So as we've talked about, Get Aboutable knows how to assist businesses to deliver accessible and inclusive offerings. And this introductory training module, together with the remaining modules in this training package, you can see the next one is about, on the 31st of July, is about a guide to developing a disability action and inclusion plan. And then the following one on the 14th of August is employing people with a disability. So these modules together will build on your learning to equip you to build your capacity to be more accessible and inclusive in your business practice. Just a bit of a heads up, for Module 3, Employing People with a Disability, will include a panel of people with disability who will share some of their lived experiences of employment. There will be an opportunity for you to pose questions to the panel from attendees. Those questions for the panels on notice at your earliest convenience to the Canberra Business Chamber so that I can provide those questions to the panel members. There will not be an opportunity to ask questions of the panel outside of that process. So on this slide, there is a picture of a person at work seated typing at a computer workstation with a large monitor and a laptop. The person has short hair with green curls at the top and has a prosthetic arm. So I'd like to thank you for your participation and contributions today. I hope the session has been beneficial. And if you'd like to contact Get Aboutable Consulting, that's our contact details. We'd be happy to assist you along your improved access and inclusion journey.
Oops, Francis, are you there?
Yes, I am.
What have I done? I'll just hit.
I can see a comment, Zlantana. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you.
And look, I'd just like to thank you very much for the presentation today. I think there's been much to reflect on. I think for me, some of the take homes was speaking up to address bad behaviour, if that's what it is. But in educating, don't be aggressive, because we want to take everyone on the journey so that we have a more inclusive society. And that doing business with people with disabilities and the elderly, that actually is good for business and can give them a competitive edge in the marketplace. So, and I know you had mentioned to me previously about the Disability Inclusion Bill, possibly in August, and it's how do we take forward to all those businesses out there that actually they need to do that. And again, it would be good for their business to have a strategic blueprint to be more strategic, inclusive and of people with disabilities. So look, thank you very much. Looking forward to the next 2 webinars. I was excited when you said there's actually going to be a panel as well.
Yes.
Yeah, look, I think, have we got some more comments on here before we wrap it up?
I think I've read through those. I just haven't answered them in the text, so that's why they still appear there, Cheryl.
Okay.
But thank you very much for everyone's participation actively today. You know, the learning continues for all of us, and I thank you very much for your openness to engage in the conversation.
Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.